Hi everyone, welcome to the second video in the basic technology course. In this video, we'll be taking a look at introduction to project management. Once again, I'm Vince. So first, let's take a look at what is a project. So a project is a group of temporary activities with a start date and an end date to create a new goods or service. So the key thing you want to differentiate here is a temporary activities, right? It has a start date and an end date. It's not an ongoing activity where you just continue to work on it, for the foreseeable future. It should actually create a new good or create a new service and has a limited amount of time and duration. Okay. So a project usually takes up limited resources, right? Because resources are money, and money is used to expend both materials, manpower, time, right? And of course money itself, right? Project is usually limited in scope, and what we want to do is to set up to have a specific scope, not just the right amount of scope. So nothing less, nothing more. So you want to do that so that you can achieve exactly what you're looking for without spending too much resources, right? But at the same time, you've got to provide enough resources so that you can accomplish this task you wanted to do. Okay. Project usually has risks, and there are a couple different kinds of risks. There's completion, cost, time. A big factor that affects a lot of projects is timing and cost escalations, because things we didn't expect to happen. So a project is usually a project has these components to it, which acts on it, right? Okay. So a project usually has unknowns, and these are the things that cause risks and surprises, right? Like COVID, for example. Like there was a lot of buildings and plans and launch plans and things that were planned for, and then something surprising happened, like a COVID or something, right? And all of a sudden, it's changed the dynamics of your project or the financials or some of these plans, right? So a big part of a project has these unknowns, right? And it's part of life. A project typically has a range of outcomes, and a well-managed project usually has a good outcome, and a poorly managed project, it's quite possible to come up with a bad outcome, right? So, and because of this, it's important to manage your projects, right? So a project typically takes weeks and months, unless you're talking about some of these mega projects which take years in general. So, like we want, if it's any shorter than weeks, then we usually don't want to have formal project management. Then I think, you just managing it as a person, our brains can handle that. But as you proceed into weeks and months, that's, when people need to put a little bit of effort into managing this project in terms of project management to be a little bit more formal, have a couple more steps. Okay. Typically, although you could do a project on your own, and you have to manage yourself. Usually, a project has a team of people who work on it, right? Now, these people may not be on there full time. They may not be always working on it. They might just be working as needed on it. So, and they need to be brought on and want to be brought off the project, right? Okay, so usually involves a team. There usually is a stakeholder, right? And what stakeholder is a person who has an interest in this project, right? When they say interest, interest is defined as either an investment or an outcome that they desire or something to that effect, right? People who are impacted by this project are your stakeholders, right? And it could be yourself, or in many cases, you could be, doing a project, but the stakeholders are other people, right? Other customers or clients who depend on this work to be completed, right? So, what does a project manager do? Okay, the core project manager plans out the work. The work typically involves tasks. It's a schedule. It has a money component to it. How people are paid, when it's being paid. It has materials related to it. Things have to be purchased. Maybe things that you pay in terms of invoicing after it's delivered. It has a manpower component. Like usually, different people, whether they're vendors or employees or other people, have to be brought on to do some work, right? Okay. He usually manages not just himself, but a team to execute the work, right? Um, so the role of the project manager is to kind of set up a structure where he can do the work, but also where other people who work for him know what they have to do, know when to start, know when to stop, know what the expectations are, know how much they're going to get paid, all of that, right? And the project manager learns enough about all the activities and how they fit into the big picture. Project managers typically, like don't know how to do every component of the work or can't do all of the work themselves, or because the work is so big that they can't, they need other help, right? But, so the key is that, the project manager will know enough about each activity, right? So, for example, if you're constructing a house, the project manager would know what the trades do and the extent of their tasks. He may not know how to do the plumbing himself, but he know what the plumbing involves, who's affected by it, how much it costs and things like that, right? Okay. He keeps the team focused and ensure there's no scope creep. So that's a really key importance there, right? Sometimes when a team work on a project, they get sidetracked and they focus, and they sometimes do suggestions or changes. They focus on one area, which is not of overall big importance to the project, and because of their fixation to that area, they let the project go in other places, such as budgeting and schedule, right? So the job of the project manager is keep the team focused so that they can, keep an eye on the big picture. And the second job they have is ensure there's no scope creep, right? So what is a scope creep? A scope creep is when, at first you want to complete a task. Like for example, um, I want to build a bathroom, right? And then scope creep say, oh, okay, now I want tiling in the bathroom. I want a marble in the bathroom. I want you to do all this other stuff, right? And of course, your original budget and schedule and planning may not have included, like any of these elements, right? And if you were to just include these elements into what you're doing, you would have scope creep because it was, because you never planned to do this work. By agreeing to this work or changing your mind and doing this work, now your scope of work is increased, and you may or may not be able to complete this in the promised schedule and budget, right? So a good project manager keeps good track of scope creep, and sometimes when you have to do the creep, you have to do it. Then at least you can make adjustments to your budget and schedule to account for it, right? So that at the end of the day, people don't just come to you and say, "Hey, you know what? Your project is over budget and and way after the schedule we agreed on." You can come back and say, "Hey, you know what? These were scope items that we were included, but we added them, and here's the impact to the project, and so we're still on time and everything is good, right?" Okay. So this, a project manager monitors risk and progress and determine how the project is happening compared to the plan, right? Because we plan for men to do all these tasks. However, sometimes reality is different. Maybe somebody gets sick. Maybe one piece of work takes longer than the others. Maybe some material is late and is missing. So a project manager actively, like looks at what's happening, monitors the risk of these things happening. He'll track to see how things are going, right, and be on the ground so they can see what's going on. And and at any given point in time, the project manager should be able to look at his schedule and his plan and say, hey, you know what? Am I working according to what I had planned? Am I ahead? Am I behind? What's going on? Were there surprises that came up? So that's also a job of a project manager. A project manager also makes decisions and reacts to unknowns to make the project a success. So everybody has a plan. However, reality doesn't always uncurl according to our planning. And what the project manager does, he's able to kind of track to see when something surprising and unexpected has occurred and make a decision on how to react to it, right? Now, sometimes, like he cannot make calls on himself because maybe, oh, okay, the client also has to talk about it, but it's his job to kind of, to talk to the client, make sure, everybody's aware of what's changed, and either by himself or the client come to make decisions, right? So decisions is very important, right? A project manager, when he sees something wrong, he can't just do nothing and ignore it and hope it gets better. His job is to make a decision, a rational decision based on what's the best outcome in the situation. Say, hey, you know what? Do we got to do something about this, or we're not going to do something about it, or we're going to track it and just keep an eye on it, right? But we got to, make a note that this happened, right? Okay. So a project manager communicates with his team and the stakeholders throughout about the good and bad, right? And that's a major part of his job is because maybe he, the stakeholders as a client, they want you should they invited a team to build a bathroom, and and the person who's managing this project, he has to both communicate good news and the bad news, right? And a lot of cases, in general, people don't like to communicate bad news, and that's a lot of times when we run into trouble, right? Because we have to communicate the truth. Because if you were to not communicate the bad news, maybe, oh, okay, we're behind schedule. Eventually, the truth will be that we're behind schedule. So, and maybe the client say, oh, we're behind schedule, but it's not an issue, or oh, we're behind schedule, so instead of doing this, do that. If he doesn't talk about the bad things, he does not give the team and the client a chance to mitigate these things that have happened, right? If something has gone bad, it's his role to kind of say the good news and the bad news so that they can address the bad news and do things to make things better, right? Okay. So the key parts of the basic project, deliverables. These are the things you need to accomplish to achieve the objective. Okay. And in the typical project, we'll have a bunch of different deliverables happening at different times. Budgets. Usually, it comes to time and money. Okay. Although in some circumstances, other things could be at play, but usually everything boils down to time and money, like materials and everything else, right? Okay. Schedule. Realistic timing with key achievement milestones, right? Before we go ahead and spend a bunch of money on something, we should have a realistic expectation of how this project will unfold and how the schedule will work, right? Okay. Resources, right? A project, and you know, the budget allows us to pick up resources, which are people, equipment, and materials, right? And we have to utilize these resources to accomplish these deliverables on schedule, okay, and within the budget, and that's a key part of project management. Okay. So let's look at an example of a typical project, right? Let's say build a new house, right? So what are the deliverables? So first, we should get an engineering plan. Make sure that the plan is sound, and that we can have everybody has a instructions to follow to make this house. Then we got to pour some concrete foundation. Now remember that concrete foundations it can only be done at a certain time. Maybe when it's too wintry or it's raining, or it's too cold or too you can't do it, right? And then after foundation is poured, then you have to build a structural frame. And after the frame is built, then you have to build the walls and the roof. And after all this stuff is ready, then you can do some electrical plumbing. So there's a bunch of different deliverables, right? Okay, come on. Okay. Next, the budget, right? The budget, would be, the principal, right? So maybe, you're the project manager, or just the budget is basically, like there's some principle. Principle is basically like, usually you put some money down, using that money as a principal, you go to a bank and they will lend you some more money based on that initial amount, right? And that's called construction mortgage. And then like how much you need by basing your adjustments on different estimation factors, or getting estimates from vendors. So as the project goes, you're going to track how your expected costs versus what you're actually paying, right? To make sure you have money to pay for the whole thing, and you're working within your budget. Okay. Um, Schedule could be managing trades. For example, the concrete piler has to be in, the concrete pour have to be in first before the structural frame, and you got to manage everybody so they show up on time, or if they're late, then you have to mitigate these risks, right? And maybe the seasonal changes, weather impact, delays. So scheduling is very important, because if you don't manage your schedule well, for example, like if your concrete is not done and then your structural guys show up, then the structural guys say, hey, I'm here. I'm going to charge you for this for my time here, even though you've done nothing, and now you spent a bunch of money and didn't get anything out of it, right? So these scheduling is very important, right? Resources, right? So you have to using this budget and these resources, you have to manage these contractors, whether they be concrete contractors, framing contractors, roofing contractors. You have to manage these materials. When are they shipped? When are they coming in? Are they being laid down at the yard at the right time? So there's a lot of resources to manage and make sure they fit the schedule and with the budget and deliverables, right? So this is a good example. So building a house, you can see why it takes so long to build a house. Um, so let's take a look at another sample project, which is building a new mobile app, right? So say it's a brand new idea, right? So say you got a brand new idea, you want to build this new app there. So what are your deliverables? So as part of this, you say, okay, well, first after we have the business deck, look at the, like whether define the economic cases for it, how we're going to make money, who your key audience is. Then we go at a business plan. Say, hey, you know what? Here's how we plan to do for the app. We're going to launch it. We'll get some money. This app will do this and this, and that's how we're going to have a business, right? And after that, you got to do some wireframe designing. What wireframe designing is just like, getting some basic ideas for your app to show how it will work, and then you have to mock it up so that you can actually see a prototype of it, or maybe on a computer or a graphic or something like that, which is one of the things we're going to do. And then after you say, okay, this is going to work, you show it some people like it, and then now you have to do a programming specification, which talks about the detailed way the program reacts. And then at some point in time, you're gonna program an app, okay? And these are the deliverables it takes to build a new mobile app, right? And then there's more, like you have to kind of get into the app stores and stuff like that, right? But it's a good example, okay? So budgets, right? So you got to think about, okay, how much money do I need to do all this work here, right? And you might think about, oh, okay, well, I need to get some money. If it's my idea, I put in some money there. I'm the founder. Maybe I got my uncle, my mom and dad, or my cousin who wants to invest. Okay, you get some outside investments, or maybe you say, okay, I need to take some bank loans because I'm gonna need more than that. And then you have to think about, okay, well, now if there's money there, maybe, or if you're maybe you think about the cash flow, how it's gonna go, if you're making some money from the app or what, right? So you have to plan all that out. Schedule, right? So say you also have a schedule. You have to engage contractors. You have to prepare a schedule. There might be issues, delays you're gonna deal with, and your resources, right? What are your resources for the programmers, graphic designers, UX UI designers. You have a lot of SaaS platforms. These are basically software. You have databases. You have like other kind of contractors that you have to manage, right? So to build a successful app, right? So whether it's building a house or building an app, there's the same kind of project. There's project management you have to do, right? So let's take a look at everybody's background here. We're just gonna take a minute and look at our group and see, okay, so how many people in this class have managed a project before? And I'm gonna pause for a couple of seconds. You can pause this video at this time. Let's go around the room and see, like, who's managed a project before. Okay, next, have you managed work by other people before? Once again, let's look around the room and see the hands. We can pause video. Well, let's look around the room and say, hey, have you managed budgets and money before in a project? Where you're kind of making sure you have the budget to do some work, right? And let's stop the video and take a look around the room. Next, have you managed schedules before? Let's take a let's like who's actually kind of do some scheduling and just see how we're doing and stuff like that, right? So let's stop here and look around the room and let's have a quick chat. Okay, so and who here have people management experience that have actually managed other people on a team to do work? So let's do a show of hands and let's have a quick chat on it. So you can pause the video here. All right. Well, that was hopefully an interesting discussion around the room. Asking these questions help us understand, how the composition of the class and who has done what. So it helps us better align ourselves to provide the right kind of instruction to meet the best needs of the classroom, right? So let's go through some quizzes. Let's see if everybody's paying attention. So what are the basic four elements of a project? So on this board we have deliverables, we have people, we have budget, we have building, we have schedule, we have resources, and we have marketing. Obviously, since there's only four basic elements, these can't all be basic elements. So we'll stop here and have a quick chat and let's see and go through it together. And let's see who gets it right. Okay, so hopefully we have some good discussion. So the four basic elements of a project are, deliverables, budget, schedule, and resources. People are part of the resources. Buildings, there's just, that's a deliverable. Marketing is just something we do. It's not, it could be a deliver, probably as, it's a deliverable, right? Or it could be a resource, right? Depending on where it's at. Okay. Next question. Let's try a different one. What is an example of a project? Washing the dishes, building a house, building a phone app, managing social media, and creating a new business. Let's have a stop in the video and let's have a quick discussion and see who gets it right. Okay. Well, building a house and definitely building a phone app, absolutely. Building a new business, that's a very distinct portion. Now, if you're running a business, that's different. That's not a project. Running a business, not a project. Building a new business, that is a project. Okay. Now, washing the dishes, I mean, it's just a task, right? It just happens so quickly. You don't really need to do project management for that. You can't really call that a project. Managing social media is an ongoing scope of work. It's work that you do day in and day out, and there's no beginning, there's no end. So that's not considered a project. Okay. Okay. So let's try another question. So, what does a good project manager do? So here are the results. Tell only good news. Yell at others to do their work. Manage team members. Plans out the work. Ensure no scope creep. Ensure clear deliverables. Manage a budget. Manage the building. Tell others to make important decisions. Know how to do all the work on a project. And know a little bit about how often all the work and how they fit in the project. So we'll take a quick stop here and see who thinks what. Okay. You can stop the video. Okay, so I try to have some fun here, but basically, a project manager doesn't just tell the good news. Telling good news is good, but we also need to know the bad news. And a good project manager will be able to tell the bad news and still have people, smiling at the end of it, right? And it's very important that the project manager be able to tell the bad news. So telling only good news, that's not a good one. Okay. Um, yell at others to do their work. So in Canada, we all try to be pretty respectful to each other, and people are very polite. So we don't like to yell at people. I just put this kind of thing as a joke because depending on different cultures and where you live in the world, sometimes it's very normal to yell at someone if they don't do their work well or something like that, right? But in Canada, we don't yell at others, to do their work, or we talk to people nicely, and people do or they don't, and they deal with the consequences, right? Okay. Manage a building. That's just a wild one I threw in there. So hopefully none of you guys chose that. Tell others to make important decisions, and that's a really important one. It seems funny, but a lot of project managers are afraid to take the responsibility and make the decisions, right? And they let a lot of other people make the decisions that they should be making. So watch out for this when when you're managing a project. Because even though you may engage different, there may be one stakeholder who wants one outcome. Is your job to kind of think about the issue, evaluate what that one stakeholder thinks and what other stakeholder thinks, and then make a decision that's the best for the project. Okay. Know how to do all the work on the project. Yeah, I mean, if you can do that, that's awesome. You're like what people call a unicorn, which is like, you know how to do every component of everything to be awesome at it. But in most cases, people are good at what certain elements of something, and that's great. To be a successful project manager, you don't need to know how to do everything, but you need to know how to do a little bit of everything and be able to manage and see what the important things are, right? So, okay. So why should we learn Jira? Because we'll be learning Jira for this course instead of Microsoft Projects or other software, right? And I want to make sure everybody's kind of understand why we're learning Jira. So so is it because it's a more popular project software for construction of things like buildings and roads? because it's often used designed for software managed development. Because graphic designers and UX UI developers often use Jira, because knowing Jira will help me get a job in tech work. So let's take a quick stop and let's see what the answers come in as. Yeah, so why should we learn it? So I mean, they're all good reasons to learn Jira, except for the one where is because it's the most popular software for constructing things like building and roads. For constructing concrete, real world things, we typically use other software. And we're going to talk in more detail in our next session. But Jira is specially designed for use in software development because there are some key differences between like building, I think something like a house and something like, like a computer software. Okay, all right, and that concludes this video. Thanks for listening and watching.